Okay, we are going to be looking at loans and talking about kind of how do they work, some different pieces of them, and particularly how does an amortization chart work. And so you're going to get to see a little bit of that at the end here. But some key vocabulary we need to know before jumping in is the lender. The lender is the organization or person that is lending money. The borrower is a person or organization that takes out a loan from the lender. Oftentimes the lender is a bank, but they take out the loan from the lender under an agreement to pay it back later with interest. The principal is the initial size of the loan. The interest is the money paid regularly at a particular rate for the use of the money lent. The APR is the cost of interest plus the fees. And when calculating a loan, we like to use the APR because it gives an accurate, a more accurate number of what the cost would be. Using the interest doesn't always give us an accurate number because if there are other fees associated in the cost, we may underplan what we have to pay back. And then to amortize is to reduce or pay off a debt with regular payments. And you'll see how amortization works in just a moment. That's a video that was watched in a previous lesson. So here's some things people typically get loans for. People get loans to buy a home. The majority of people do not save up the amount of money to buy a home in cash or right out. Most people have to take out a loan called a mortgage in order to buy a home. So buying a home is one of the things that people typically get a loan for. Another is buying a car. Now it is this one is a little bit more possible where people can save up and pay flat out for a car, but oftentimes it's a large enough purchase where people will get a car loan in order to buy a vehicle. Another thing that people use loans for is consolidating debt. And this can be an unsecured personal loan or a consolidation loan. And this would be used if, let's say you had several credit cards, all at different rates and different payment times and different changes, this and that, and you wanted to take all of your credit card debt and consolidate it into one payment, into one loan. And so you would go through maybe a bank or some kind of financial institution that would pay off your credit card debts, and then you would just you take out a loan to pay off your other loans, if that makes sense. You take out a loan to pay off other debts, and then you're just paying it in one place. Another place people get loans for is paying for school. And that can be federal or private student loans. So federal would be through a federal student loan, and that is taken out from the government. The other is private student loans, and that would be taken out maybe through a bank or through a private lender. Another would be starting a business, like using a small business loan, and paying medical expenses or other life circumstance expenses through an unsecured personal loan. So remember, there are secured loans. Those are things like mortgages, cars, even federal student loans. Those are secured by some kind of collateral. So with a mortgage, if you don't pay, you could lose your house. With your car, if you don't pay, they can take your car. Federal, if you don't pay, they can garnish your wages and take them straight out of your paycheck. Small business loans, if you don't pay, They can take any of the materials or those kind of things. They can seize assets. Unsecured loans are typically for things that don't have like tangible collateral. So an unsecured personal loan for medical expenses, there's no collateral for medical expenses. A lot of times unsecured loans tend to have higher interest rates because of that. So let's talk about estimating the cost of a loan. So the amount of, in order to estimate this, we're going to take the amount of the loan, multiply it by the APR. Remember, we do not use the interest rate. We use the APR because that includes any other fees that might be included. And then we multiply that by the number of years. So for example, a $10,000 loan by a 10% APR paid back over 5 years would cost $5,000, which is crazy because that's half the amount of the loan itself. But we would then take the amount paid in interest and add that to our principal to find the total amount of the money borrowed or the money paid. So if I found a car for $10,000, I borrowed it, I have an APR of 10%, and I'm paying that payment back over 5 years, the total cost of the car, even though the car itself was $10,000, the total cost that I pay over the 5-year span ends up being $15,000. And so in order to estimate the amount of monthly payments of how much it would cost per month, you would take the years and convert that to months. So 12 months in a year. So we would do 12 times 5 to get 60. And we divide the total amount by 60 to figure out how much we would pay per month. And just a little note at the bottom here, these formulas produce estimates that are slightly higher than the actual cost and payments because they do not account for the reduction of interest payments as you repay the loan. And we're going to talk about that in this thing called amortization. And we use a chart. You see the chart here at the bottom. We'll get to that. We use a chart to track how much of our payment goes toward interest versus principal. So on an amortization chart, we'll see things like the month. That's the month of payment. So your first month of payment is month number 1. Over a 60-month period, your last month of payment would be month 60. And these charts have it laid out all the way from month 1 to month 60. For like large purchases, like a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, it breaks it all the way down every month for 30 years. How much is going toward the principal versus how much is going toward interest. And it breaks it down for the entire 30-year span, each month over 30 years. It talks about the beginning of balance, and that's how much you have left to pay. It shows you your payment, the principal, how much of it's actually going toward what was borrowed, the interest, how much is actually going toward your interest, the total interest, so this is like a rolling amount of how much you've paid overall in interest, and the end balance, the remaining amount left to pay after the payment. So let's take a look down here at this chart, and it will make a little bit more sense. And this chart does not go all the way to the end of the payment period. It only goes through 17 months. So this is for a loan of $6,000. And if you notice here, so we have our month. So the first month of payment, the second month of payment, third month of payment, and so on. And what you notice is the payments do not change. So every month, the payment is $127.48 every month. So in talking about budgeting, this would be really beneficial for your budget. You would write this in, and this payment doesn't change. It's fixed $127.48. And that's really the number you have to worry about as the person who's budgeting and making the payment back. What this chart helps us understand is that the principal, because of that payment, there's an amount that goes toward the principal, which I highlighted in orange, and in green here, there's an amount that goes toward the interest. So out of the $127.48, $77.48 of that money is going toward the principal. $50 of that is going toward the interest. And then what happens is, that's your interest payment. The principal is subtracted from your beginning balance to give your new amount. And that's your ending balance. So on month 2, we're going to take our ending balance, and that's what you start with month 2. Notice that it is less than month 1, and that's the whole point, right? This is going to decrease here, and then that value is going to decrease here every payment that you make. But notice that the payment made, it has to include the interest every time. So even though you're paying $127 each time, what's happening is your interest rate is now being applied to $5,922.52. So it's not being applied to $6,000. Down here on month 10, the interest is being applied to $5,278.96. It is not being applied to $6,000. And so every month that you make a payment, the amount of your payment stays the same, but the amount that is applied to the principal increases. Initially, it just increases ever so slightly, maybe by like a few cents, or depending on the size of the payment. And the interest decreases, because the interest is based on how much you owe, and every time you make a payment, the amount that you owe decreases. And so that's kind of how this amortization chart works. We'll take a look again. Think about this example. So we borrow $10,000 at 10% over 5 years. And down here, there's a little asterisk talking about how it's not really accurate. The monthly payment's not really accurate because there's that reduction of interest as you repay the loan. This is based on 10% for the entire loan. If you were to pay 10% of $10,000 every time you made a payment. So there's like a nice loan calculator here on Practical Money Skills. You can go to practicalmoneyskills.com/calculators, and there are several different calculators that come on. But this one helps us come up with an amortization chart. And so I took the numbers that we used, $10,000, so $10,000 loan at 10%, and then the length of the loan I used 60 months. So that's just matching what we had here. $10,000, 10%, 60 months. So let's see what our amortization chart looks like. So our minimum payment, this would be the amount that you pay every month. Notice that it is lower, $212.47. That's lower than the $250 month estimate. And the total finance charge, how much you would have paid toward interest, is also lower. It's $2,748 instead of the $5,000 that we had estimated. So we can use that estimate. It lands us a little bit high, and then you can actually go back. So let's look at the amortization chart. Again, the minimum payment, that's just a consistent, steady payment. Look at that, $212.48 all the way through 60 months. But watch what happens, and it happens rather slow at first, and then it ramps up toward the end. So your beginning balance of $10,000, when you make that $212 payment, 83 of those dollars are going toward interest. And so only $129 are being applied to the $10,000 loan. That means in month 2, your $10,000 loan is $129 less for month 2, and so on and so forth. So take a look. I'm just going to scroll down this chart. And if you notice, every month there's more money applied to the principal and less money applied to the interest. The same payments made every month, but there's more money applied to the principal. At month 30, you would expect to be about halfway through your payment. I mean, that's halfway through the plan. But if you notice here at month 30, it's significantly still more than half. I mean, half would be $5,000, and we're looking at $5,700. And then eventually, what ends up happening is our interest continues to drop, more and more money is put toward the principal, toward month 60. And so that's what an amortization chart looks like. It's kind of confusing, but it's better, right? This is a more confusing way of thinking about things, but you're spending a lot less money than how we calculated it over here at just doing 10% of $10,000 every time you pay that loan back. Essentially, when you pay back a loan, you pay back a portion of interest and a portion of principal, and the principal, that piece drops the payment down and changes, or it changes your remaining balance so that the following payment is more is applied to the principal and less is applied to the interest. At first it happens very slow, and then it kind of increases. And you can see in the second to last column, the total interest, that is just a running total of every time the interest is added back for the month, so that you can see over the life of the loan, $2,748.23 is spent on interest for borrowing the loan. And that's part of the reason why it's so important to have good credit, to have a good payment plan in place so that you can get the lowest loan possible. If we cut this number from 10% to 5%, let's see what happens. Our monthly payment dropped by about $40, and the amount that we're paying over time is now $1,300 instead of, was it $2,100 or whatever, or $2,700. So think, just a 5% change here changed our finance charge by a significant amount of money. So the lower the interest rate you can get, the less you'll pay over time, and it really does matter. Even if we did like 4.5, helps if I use numbers. Okay, so it drops it a little bit every time. Okay, it does matter. So, good stuff to know, and hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you kind of have a better understanding of how loans work, at least how paying loans back works.